Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. This is Trolling with Logic, and it's a very kind of rushed, slapped together episode. We've had so many problems getting tonight's guest on. The original time, it was the technical problems, and just before we went on air, the technical problems have reappeared. So hopefully we can hold out long enough to give you a good show. Just to let everyone know, you can ask your questions anytime in the chat room, and you can call in. As you can see, the Skype contact is Trolling with Logic, and like I say, if you call in, please remember you grant us permission to use your likeness, because the show is later uploaded on iTunes and YouTube. Like I say, it's a reduced crew today. Welcoming back Sheila. How are you doing?
Hey, Cal. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
All right, and so we'll very quickly introduce the guest. If you've been watching the show for a while, he'll be quite familiar to you. He is, I don't know if he's the former or he's still the secretary of the Scottish Secular Society. He was also all right, and a journalist for Gay Star News, if I remember correctly.
Scots Gay.
Scots Gay, yeah. I get those
10
two
years,
mixed up.
10 years stint. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, and also he wrote the book Sexual Fascism. I can't remember the publication date. And
examining the treatment of the sex in the Scottish media.
Okay, and his most recent book, which is just released, is it tomorrow? It's really officially released, Garry.
That's the launch, yeah. I did it privately on Facebook and stuff with my friends on Scottish Secular Society, and it's Religious Fascism. And it's the repeal of Section 28, which I hope you'll give me a moment to talk about on air, providing we don't crash. And
yes, as long as everything holds up. So, yeah, please welcome. So, everyone, please welcome Garry Otton. It's great to have you back on. And like I say, I am really sorry about the delays in getting this show and the problems we've had.
Okay, thanks, Cal. Thanks, Sheila.
I suppose... No, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
You just right. So your new book is Religious Fascism: The Repeal of Section 28, and I think probably for some of our viewers and listeners, the best thing I think would be what exactly was or is Section 28.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, some will see the imposition of Section 28, which was the law that forbade the quote-unquote promotion of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship, against the backdrop of Margaret Thatcher addressing a sea of waving Union Jacks at the Conservative Party conference, 1987. Following hot on the heels, of course, of exaggerated tabloid stories of black lesbian self-defense groups, or books like Jenny Lives with Erica Martin, Susan Bush's book, which was found in school libraries. Actually, it was found in a teacher's resources library. Accompanying this law's passage in 1988, a firebomb went off at the offices of London's gay newspaper, Capital Gay. If I remember correctly, far from condemning the action, Tory MP Dame Elaine Kellett-Bowman stood up in the House of Commons to voice her contempt for gay sex and declared that it was right that there should be an intolerance of evil. What followed soon after that was a dramatic increase of attacks on gay men and another bombing of a gay bar in Rochester with tear gas. Now, when this Tory, anti-gay, religiously inspired law was challenged in 2000, Scotland was the main battleground. In England and Wales, efforts to keep Section 28 on the statute books was, to a large extent, pretty pointless, since Section 28 applied not to schools, but local authorities, whose control many had opted out of under measures introduced by, of all people, former Tory leader Margaret Thatcher. So, a bit of a waste of time there. But the Scots will remember the repeal as a time when the gay community were under attack from billboards mounted across every available space in Scotland, vilifying homosexual practices. Intellectuals who wrote newspapers to lend support were denounced. Newspapers spread warnings of cliques, rumours of an international conspiracy, and attempts were made to close LGBT organisations, and doors and windows of such premises were smashed. Pictures could even be found in newspapers at the time illustrating homosexuals' distinguishing features, you know, their fingers. Parliament wavered and buckled while the community in crisis was left to defend itself against a rise in verbal abuse, beatings, suicide, murders. This wasn't Germany in 1935. This was Scotland in 2000. And it was simply sparked when MSP Wendy Alexandra announced the repeal of Section 28, and Christian fundamentalist Brian Souter poured approximately £2 million into a Keep the Clause campaign, which was backed by Cardinal Winning of the Catholic Church and a string of social conservatives. Now, it began in 1999 when controversial American TV evangelist Pat Robertson, owner of a mammoth media, educational and legal empire in the USA, with an estimated value of $1 billion. I mean, we're talking big. There's big money for the Bank of Scotland. Forget, you know, having customers in Scotland filling the coffers of the Bank of Scotland. This was a biggie. This was bigger than having, you know, the population of Scotland on board. Pat Robertson was introduced to ultra-conservative Catholic Bill Hendry of the Bank of Scotland's executive vice president in the USA. And the bank announced, soon after, the bank announced it was setting up a telebanking operation with Pat Robertson, who once claimed that, and I'm quoting now from his, the feminist agenda is not about equal rights for women. It's about a socialist, anti-family political movement that encourages women to leave their husbands, kill their children, practice witchcraft, destroy capitalism, and become lesbians. So you only have to Google Pat Robertson to get plenty of classic idiotic statements like that and better. But the bank announced it was setting up the telebanking operation with him. And as Bank of Scotland share prices fell and clients started withdrawing their savings, the bank was forced to pull out. That was when Robertson labelled Scotland a dark place, overrun by homosexuals. The Bank of Scotland called on media boss and ex-Sun editor Jack Irvine. He was also a drummer in the band B.A. Robertson, if you remember that, to step in and help. And it was during the equally contentious debate about an equal age of consent, Irvine was famous for referring to pretty young boys of 16 who couldn't vote being mature enough to be bum chums for sleazy old pervs. So you get an idea where Jack Irvine was coming from. Scotland's richest man, stagecoach boss Brian Souter, a Bank of Scotland customer, a member of the Hellfire and Brimstone Church of Nazarene, was sufficiently inspired by Irvine to court him for an idea of his own. They shared a good lawyer. Jack Irvine's business partner, Peter Watson, sometimes accompanied him on business trips to the Cayman Islands. He was the man behind legal firm Levi and McRae, which legaled articles for the press, so pretty influential. And as Scotland's top lawyer, Watson counted the Lord Advocate of Scotland, Elish Angelini, an appointed member of the Scottish Government, as one of his most prestigious clients. So big names here. Powerful figures backed this new Keep the Clause campaign. Not just Martin Clark, the editor of Scotland's top-selling tabloid, The Daily Record, but also the editor of The Sun, the Scottish editions of The Sun, Scotland on Sunday, the Daily Mail, of course, the Daily Telegraph, of course, and numerous other publications. Given the surfeit of Christian journalists and columnists in the media in Scotland, and both the Westminster and Scottish executive, there was no shortage of allies to respond to this emerging Christian campaign. Under the auspices of preventing the repeal of Section 20 of Clause 28, Section 22A it was called in Scotland, gays were made scapegoats for a war against the siren voices of liberalism, secularism and permissiveness. Education pacts that either sought to counter bullying by creating a better understanding of gay people, or sex education leaflets aimed specifically at gay people to encourage safer sex, were put under scrutiny. All the while, the media perniciously portrayed homosexuals as a sinister menace with inferences of a homosexual lobby seeking to prey on impressionable youth and further a selfish agenda. Homosexuals were maligned in a media campaign furnished by, well-funded Christian charities and organisations, some collecting around $2 million a year in annual income, like the Christian Institute and Christian Action Research and Education, which plants interns in government and media. And Scotland's fledgling parliament would twist and turn as one compromise after another was offered to placate the pious. Pleas for equal treatment were contorted into demands for additional rights. For example, a victim of the Soho pub bombing was denied compensation under the Criminal Injuries Compensation Act after sustaining injuries and losing his partner, whilst the partner of a heterosexual couple won theirs. And then when Martin Fitzpatrick, who fought successfully against eviction from a house he shared with his partner after he died, former religious correspondent and Daily Record columnist Tom Brown wrote, "What worries me is that this will be taken as capitulation to the homosexual cause, the signal to demand more." So we were always wanting more. Gay people have always fought for equality, not more. Never mind. SNP MP Jim Sillars at the time was writing in the Scottish Sun, he had his own column there, and he sneered that test tube births on a scale of millions with the sperm of homosexuals conveyed artificially to women's ovaries in order to give homosexuals full rights to have children. And that test tube world is the only logical conclusion of the Thatcherite campaign of full and equal rights. So, we were consistently smeared everywhere. And my long-term favourite is Gerald Warner. And he wrote in Scotland on Sunday, a Catholic columnist, and he wrote that homo-fascism was aggressively and shamelessly the ideology of the Parliament, and that homosexual missionaries were coming for their children and incited people to take to the streets in protest. He used to mock the lisp of the Labour MSP Wendy Alexandra, who was putting this through Parliament. He kept calling her in his columns the Minister for Communities. She fronted the campaign for repeal, and he also suggested she was living testimony to the unwisdom of abolishing the ducking stool. Any equal treatment of gays was fair game. Gerald Warner's homophobia, it knows no bounds now or then. On gay partnerships, I remember he scoffed, there is a vote winner for you. Possibly with the cooperation of sympathetic local authorities, provision could be made for the romantically minded to hold their wedding at the public convenience where the happy couple first met. Very nice. Special letters, pages of letters in the newspapers were rolled out against repeal, and they frothed with homophobia. This is one from John McBride of Shettleston, who wrote in the Scottish Sun, "I don't have any kids myself, but if I did and anyone tried to teach them about homosexuality, I'd probably end up assaulting the teacher." In the Metro, which is owned by the same publisher as the Daily Mail, 9 out of the 10 letter writers in the London edition were found to share the same names or initials as those in the Scottish editions, even though they wrote what they wrote about was completely unrelated. Anyway, moving on. Cardinal Winning was soon declaring gay sex a perversion. And what inspired my cover, which on the face of it, you think, whoa, really strident here, you know, the Christian Nazi symbol, the flags that the Christian Nazis used to fly with religious fascism. But it was inspired by Cardinal Winning, who declared gay sex a perversion. And on a trip to Malta, compared the gay lobby's imagined distribution of material in schools to Nazi bombs during the Second World War. Upon his return from Malta, he was met with press reports of a serious attack on a young doctor outside an Edinburgh gay bar. Threats of suicide to the gay switchboard at that time doubled. Yeah. When a string of professors and academics wrote to the press sharing their concerns, they were mocked by the Keep the Clause camp. Journalists regularly attacked Labour politicians who supported repeal. People like Donald Duer's advisor Philip Chalmers was caught with a lady who was not his wife, although she may have been somebody else's, in the back seat of his car in a red light area after the record was tipped off by the police. Donald Duer's chief of staff, John Rafferty, was also targeted when he exaggerated death threats to Health Minister Susan Deakin over her support for abortion. But the chief target was always Wendy Alexandra, described in the record as bossy, a spinster, 5 foot nothing, and showered by a host of other uncharitable and misogynistic remarks. I mean, they suggested she was riding high in the Department of Frump, and gave her a makeover. This is with the Daily Record. They gave her a makeover, superimposing her head onto the body of a woman curled up on a couch wearing a white trouser suit with lilac strapped shoes. Ugh. Alan Cochrane, in Scottish editions of the Daily Telegraph, called her the accident-prone and politically myopic Miss Alexander. Channel 4 awarded Wendy Alexander a trophy and the title Parliamentarian of the Year in Scotland. But the press were delighted to report how she smashed it to pieces as she got out of a car at Heathrow Airport. And the following year, Channel 4 awarded it to Christian homophobe Baroness Young. Yeah. I need iron. Iron brew. Bars told me to show that during the programme. Just most of the press accepted paid advertising of Keep the Clause petitions to complete and send to the government. Many were backed by articles or even marked to indicate exactly where to sign to keep Section 28. Or Section 2A, as it was known in Scotland. And churches too followed, urging their congregations to sign. A free mailing address was set up to collect thousands of signed petitions, and the Scottish Sun found condoms sent by gay rights activists fighting to scrap Clause 28, whilst the Record reported the delivery of old beds and refrigerators. And I actually remember an email some time ago, someone told me that they'd sent a car. I don't know how true that was, but someone would have to confirm that. But anyway, Brian Souter threatened to launch a private referendum. This was big. He castigated the Electoral Reform Society, ERS, for refusing to back it. So, using an old electoral register, he launched his own after accusing a gay clique in the Labour administration of wrecking his plans. MP Jimmy Ray referred to a gay mafia in the Scottish Sun. She's a big tabloid. And in the Scotsman, he advised people didn't vote Labour into power to allow the country to be run by a gay mafia. The public don't want to know what homosexuals are doing. This is the trendy minority trying to dictate to the majority, and it won't work. I mean, here you see echoing the Nazi treatment of Jews in the 30s, when there were references to powerful Jewish cliques influencing government and of Jewish trickery. The Scottish Sun referred openly to gay dirty tricks, and the record warned the Section 28 turmoil has gone from unsatisfactory to downright sinister, and it's now clear that powerful factions are determined that the people of Scotland will not have their say. And this was also aimed at ERS member and gay Labour MP Stephen Twigg. The ERS was in fact concerned about the rise in violence towards gays being reported by the police. Keep the clause had already become a playground catchphrase, and police set up a special surgery in Edinburgh. The Daily Mail printed a double-page spread with an anatomical diagram of the human phalanges explaining homosexual men have slightly shorter second fingers than straight men, and the record also carried the information along with the homophobic content. In a film review for American Beauty, the Daily Mail detailed how Hollywood was demonizing heterosexual life as part of a disturbing new pro-gay agenda, and this held that heterosexuality was a curse to be denigrated and mocked wherever possible, and that gays could never win the power they craved in society without undermining heterosexuals whenever possible. 3/4 of those surveyed by the Gay Police Association cited belief of perpetrator as a prime motivator behind homophobic incidents. Their advertisement showing a Bible and a pool of blood with the words "in the name of the Father" was censored by the Advertising Standards Authority, despite coming 8th in a list of campaigns receiving the most complaints. Keep the Clause billboards were never removed despite widespread defacements from protesters all across Scotland. Outcast, the gay political website, was closed. According to the internet survey, service provider, following a complaint, a university lecturer was paid almost £250,000 in damages and legal costs by the ISP Demon, which is owned by Scottish Telecom, in an out-of-court settlement over material carried on the site. Outcast was a respected, nationally distributed gay political magazine run by volunteers with a circulation of around 10,000. It boasted contributions from many people who were sympathetic to gay equality. And the ISP Net Benefit wanted an assurance from a solicitor acting for Outcast that they would not print anything libelous. Obviously, no solicitor can give a guarantee like that. And that was repeated by Chris Morris, who had previously taken Britain to the European Court over its unequal age of consent. Then a Christian couple, backed by Christian legal representatives, sought to take Glasgow City Council to court for promoting homosexuality. They eventually withdrew, but succeeded in persuading the council to write to all council-funded LGBT groups, warning them not to promote homosexuality. And of course, the media spun this as a victory. As the campaign to repeal went nationwide, there was a surge of violence and murders, particularly gay men across the whole country, like 50-year-old Alex Noble, who met his fate after picking up an 18-year-old in Glasgow, and Ethan, a sensitive boy who was being bullied in a Catholic comprehensive in the Highlands. They would have taught him, that he was intrinsically disordered. He wrote in his diaries how he was being bullied. I mean, the guy was 16. He hung himself. He went to his room and hung himself. The fledgling parliament shook and wobbled at every turn towards repeal. At first, ministers said that the guidelines on sex education were adequate and would not be reviewed. Then they were. Despite insisting there'd be no replacement clause for Section 2A, the Scottish Executive was soon tabling one. Ministers insisted the guidelines on sex education would not be made legally binding. Then came a U-turn. The public were assured by the then First Minister, Donald Dewar, that there would be no inclusion of marriage in any guidelines. But with an amendment by a Catholic MSP, Michael McMahon, religious campaigners were soon trying their luck with that one too. That was nothing compared to the semantic contortions that Scotland went through over sex education. I mean, without a national curriculum, as in England and Wales, Scotland has no need for statutory guidelines. There were no calls for teachers for statutory guidance on drugs or alcohol where teachers were trusted. Now there were calls for statutory guidelines on sex education. The Minister for Children and Education at that time was Sam Galbraith, and he emphasised that these were not guidelines which would govern the content of statutory legislation, always rebuffed as contrary to Scottish practice, but guidance, which governed the conduct of sex education in Scotland. And this was just guidance to state that parents had to be consulted if sex education appropriate to pupils' ages was given to their children, and that they could even remove them from classes, although that right already existed. Okay, Section 28 was eventually repealed, and stories of schools invaded by homosexual propaganda proved entirely false. The same couldn't be said for religion, which, if it didn't already own the school, had their unelected representatives on all of Scotland's education committees. If school children couldn't be rounded up to visit churches, clerics were invited into the classroom to work with children in so-called non-denominational schools without parents' consent and knowledge, which happened at Kirktonholme Primary School in East Kilbride, where extreme sect Church of Christ had been pushing creationist anti-science literature on children for 8 years before they were rumbled by the Scottish Secular Society and the Daily Record, albeit under a new editor. So, finishing up, should we burn down all the churches? No, we shouldn't. We shouldn't burn the churches, and we never will rid the world of mysticism, spirituality, religion, or belief, even if we tried. However, we can ensure no church is awarded special privileges and operates equally and fairly in society. We can invest in a secular society with freedom of religion and freedom from it. And by doing so, we will hopefully prevent the polarising of the religious debate that contributes to wars, division, loss of human life, and religious fascism. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garry.
Thank you very much, Garry.
One question I wanted to ask was I'm echoing badly from you, Garry. That's better.
Are
now.
you?
Yeah, it's
right.
it's gotten better now. I was going to ask was, how much do you think the whole Section 28 carry on? Did you think that held back gay rights in Scotland?
Yes. I mean, there are so many things that hold the progression of gay rights. You've got the independents at the moment. Nobody's really finding it easy to challenge the government in these difficult times. And also, of course, when Section 28 was being debated, everything was focused on Section 28, as everything was focused on the equal age of consent before it. And nothing could move forward. Nothing could move forward at all. We wanted to, gay people wanted to move on and create a climate of equality, which could have been done many years ago. It could have been done in the 60s. Just simply create a new law instead of all these little bolt-ons all the time with these extraordinary bolt-ons. I mean, Section 28 was a very complicated affair. It was an amendment to the Local Government Act of 1986, and it was enacted by the it was enacted by the Local Government Act in 1988. That's it, and it was hatched from a Department of Education and Science circular saying that there's no place in the school under any circumstances for teaching which advocates homosexual behaviour, almost as if, as a norm, almost as if, this is something that can be promoted. I mean, you either are or you aren't, or you either participate in gay sex or you don't. It's not something that really can be promoted. Extraordinary. But you have all these kind of old farts in the House of Lords and in the Tory party that were just churning out a lot of rubbish. I mean, since that time, much of the Tory party who were involved in that campaign have since apologised for their behaviour and for not supporting repeal. Yeah. So we've moved on.
Yeah. And have the apologies been met well by the gay community? Have they been accepted?
Do gay people vote Tory?
No, but just in general, have the apologies just been welcomed and accepted at the very least?
Yes, I think amongst gay organisations, of course, any apologies are going to be gratefully accepted. We really do have to move on. But my concerns are always, what was it all about in the first place? And, I feel that it starts, it's a cultural thing, it starts in the schools. We have to educate people better. Yeah. And we are a long way off that. I mean, only recently, I think it was last year, the British Humanist Association were doing some research, and they found some 40 or 50 schools actually introducing Section 28 style proposals in their conditions of the school. So, the government have had to clamp down on that, but the fact that they were being introduced is very worrying. And that's not only where it's being introduced, it is being rolled out across the world. And that's the point of my book. And that's the very sad note that this book ends on, is how it's being introduced to Russia. And it's really quite criminal what is happening there, where gangs, marauding gangs, are just like that young, I think it was a young doctor who was beaten up outside the gay pub. He said in the paper after he was in hospital, these gangs of kids who did this will be endorsed by the words of such people as Cardinal Winning. And that's what I fear. The Russian Orthodox Church will be issuing statements that these youths will feel justifies their actions, justifies what they're doing, raping and capturing young people and filming them on the internet and posting them on the internet when they're looking for a lover or something like that. And, it's disgraceful.
You come in there, Sheila. I think you mean.
Well, it's astounding that as advanced as we've gotten in technology and medicine and space travel, that we're still in a dark ages socially when it comes to interacting with our own kind.
Yeah. It's one of the, I mean, after 10 years of doing my column in Scots Gay, which resulted in my first book, which was examining the treatment of sexuality, it was an extraordinary 10 years. It started with the Dunblane massacre, the gunning down of a classroom of children, which was, the reporting was very sexualized. You know, they assumed that was this a pervert, was he a paedophile and things. And then there was various campaigns, and it finished it started in 1995 and it finished in 2005. So that period covered the repeal of Section 28, and that's, yes, it worries me that we haven't moved on, and that's why after I finished writing up all of this is why I launched and founded the Scottish Secular Society, because I really do believe that having done all that research, I've gotten to the root of where much of this comes from, and it is religion, and I feel secularism is the answer.
Just say, what have your engagements with the religious community in Scotland been like?
I'm a great fan of theirs. You serious, Cal? No, they don't like me. No, it's not fair. I have been to a number of churches and had lovely conversations with individuals, and individually people are very nice, very sweet, very engaging, and I find it useful. I've been to the Quakers quite recently. You know, lovely people. Can't be done with the half an hour silence, but otherwise, you know, great people. I've been to spiritualist churches. I'm very interested in the history of spiritualism. I, have a lot of empathy with the movement that explored or tried to research its truthfulness in the early part of the last century, and the women's movement, which was more anti-Christian, and the way the Christians have tried to control and limit the growth of spiritualism, and unfortunately it's now turned into a sort of almost a Christian church, which I think is very unfortunate. So I'm interested in that. And I have did some research on some churches in Glasgow, where I went around to various churches, and what I saw disturbed me, and I included some of that research in my book, Religious Fascism. I see people have died off. The old people have died. The lovely old people that made chutney, the old preacher that would send money to Africa to help the poor. They've gone, and what's in their place are alpha courses, church planting, aggressive political campaigning. It's much fewer, but they are more aggressive, and these churches aren't pretty.
Yeah, I just following on from that. I mean, I think everyone can tell from your accent you're not from Scotland originally. But when you first came up to Scotland, were you quite surprised, when you saw what the churches were like up here, what the Christian lobby is like?
Well, going to church wasn't my first port of call. I didn't go to church when I came up here. I came up here because I had a boyfriend, and I've been up here in Scotland for I'm getting on for 15 years now, and I do apologise for my accent. As hard as I try, I cannot pick it up, and I still have this horrible. When I go down to London, I still have this horrible Peckham accent, and when I go down to London and I start relapsing back into my sort of London accent, I'll keep saying things like when I'm saying yes, which I can't help.
Yeah.
and people think it sounds ridiculous. I belong nowhere.
But I think,
I'm not going back. I love Scotland.
yeah. I think one that just from my own background was, what were your first time you encountered the wee freeze when you became aware of them, and just what was your reaction to find out that such people exist?
Oh, weird. I was on Harris doing hill walking, and we stayed in I can't remember what it was. I can never remember those long Gaelic names. And we stayed in this kind of bed and breakfast hostel, and it was raining, and there was these people dressed in black, children and people of all ages walking by dressed in black, clutching these Bibles. I thought, my God, there's nothing to do here, and the only thing to do is to go to church. This is really sad. And they did that 3 times, and they looked so sick and ill. They were outside the church, and I was outside the church. I think I had my yellow jogging bottoms and a bright blue top, and it was Sunday, and I was outside the church, and there they all were in black, and I thought, it's a funeral. And it's and I think the pastor or the minister, he came storming out, and he pointed his finger at me and he said, "You should be in church." Oh, you picked the wrong one here. We had a discussion. Had a little chat.
Yeah. Just for anyone who's unaware
of
what the wee freeze are, it's unique to the kind of Highlands of Scotland. It's a kind of quite fundamentalist branch of Protestantism. Probably most notorious for their absolute obsession with the Sabbath. No transport, no shops, chaining up play parks and things like that on the Sabbath. They were absolutely obsessed with it, and now it seems to be, as we well know, their gay marriage and things like that is now their main obsession.
I know. When I was talking to the minister, I was again my obsession as well.
In that, there's a question from the chat room for you, Gary. Have you ever excuse me, I'll say that again. Have you ever befriended any religious leaders, or have you ever heard of any talks between gay rights groups and church leaders?
We're presently. I'm still secretary of the Scottish Secular Society, and we are still trying to perform outreach to people like the Church of Scotland to actually talk to them and see if there is, common ground. I think that's very important, and we've done very well on Secular Scotland, huge numbers, and it's one of the most active pages in Scotland. There's so much debate going on there every day. It's pretty uncensored, so a lot of religious people don't like that and won't speak to us because of that. I think they're being a little bit unfair because we don't, apart from the basic things of no personal insults, it's, it really is for discussion. And it's not, Secular Scotland is not the Scottish Secular Society. That's quite different. That's an organisation that, does the campaigning. But Secular Scotland is an open board. And people can, more or less write what they like. But there's some lovely contributions from religious people sometimes, and they are inspiring. And there's one evangelical lady that I like very much, and when she writes, she's very secular. She says, "Look, it's a personal thing, and I don't impose it on anybody." And that to me is much more inspiring than proselytizing. I think it's really nice when people have something and it becomes more interesting that way when you're invited in rather than them going out and, broadcasting on Buchanan Street or trying to provoke arrest by, shouting in loud hailers and things like that, which they try to do. That's horrible. I don't like that. But yes, I mean, I want to see more engagement. I could have gone on being angry with all the things that I've seen in my ambitions to see gay people treated equally. I've always wanted to find a way over the anger, and secularism is it. It's the compromise. It is the halfway house. It is a place where we can meet. And I want to see religion a little bit more of an effort to engage with us. And we will achieve that. And we have a new chair now, Spencer Falds, and I think he's going to do a really good job. Yeah. Caroline did a blooming great job, but absolutely brilliant. And Spencer is pretty, good at negotiating and engaging with religious people. And he's probably a lot better than I am, because people still see me as the angry gay activist. They have for a long time. Let them get on with it.
Another question has come in there. Do you think Scottish independence will have any effect on the cause of gay rights? Hello, Gary? Gary? I think I have lost Gary. Sheila, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Gary, can you please chime in when you get back? I'm not hearing Gary.
Sorry, am I not to speak about? I want to say that an independent Scotland is going to be a great place to be gay. I don't think it's going to have any adverse effects being independent, and I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Sorry, Gary, we lost I think the first part of your reply there, but I think we got the main point.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. All right, okay.
It's okay. Sheila, I'll go back to you. You've probably got some questions stored up.
Actually, not really. He's done a really good job of explaining how things are going. Do you, as far as the Scottish Secular Society and gay rights are concerned, do they have anything upcoming that they're going to be, kind of doing, kind of down that path, I suppose?
What you mean with respect to gay rights and things?
Yeah.
Do you mean? No, not that I'm aware of. The Scottish Secular Society, of course, well, particularly with my involvement, has always been solidly behind gay equality and gay rights. It has such a close relationship with religion. That's been beaten up by religion so much. Why shouldn't it? There are secular societies that don't and refuse to have anything to do with it, and we're not one of them. The Scottish Secular Society is very open, and if you probably know, on Secular Scotland on Facebook, every day there are stories of gay inequality connected to religion that are published to bring people's awareness to the fact that the injustices are still going on.
Mm-hmm. What are the other? Do the other organizations state some sort of reason why they don't want to mess with that, or is it just too much of a hot button issue?
Well, I'm only thinking of one, which is a very purist secular group. I don't want to mention names, but they distance themselves from it. We're not, such a purist secular society. We'd like to engage secularism on all levels.
I want to just how far do you think Scotland advanced well in the area of gay rights? Do you feel? Or do you think
very slowly? Don't forget, it was not. It was criminal to, my goodness, was it 1980 or something, or So I'm going to get really asked for this. I should remember. So it was 1985, or it was in the 80s that it was still illegal, and it's Scotland has been well behind, but we've come a long way. We are becoming a modern nation, and we're growing up pretty fast, and that's a good sign.
And in what areas do you think Scotland has to work on in the area on the subject of gay rights?
I think we need to deal with religion. We need to stop it being so noisy. It's only a minority, but they're very noisy. And I think we must be louder about secularism. Secularism is unfortunately sidelined in Scotland. And actual fact, at the moment, I think that's actually more important than certain aspects of gay rights, because we more or less have reached now full equality. Gay people are allowed to be married now. So gay people can get married. So even though marriage is not something that I think it's a patriarchal institution, I'm not a big fan of it, but I am a fan of equality, and I think it's important that we have equality. That's absolutely vital. And Scotland really has everything right now. There's very few minor things that we need to ensure that the transgendered are treated equally. There are certain sort of issues that gay rights organisations are working on, and they deserve our support to reach full equality. But I think one very important aspect of ensuring equality is to deal with religious privilege in Scotland. It must stop.
I think secularism is the one that they're most threatened by, because it's the one that threatens religion specifically, or that they feel threatens religion specifically. It kind of feels like we're attacking their beliefs rather than just trying to make things more fair.
Yeah, exactly. They're terrified, absolutely terrified. Not all of them. Some religions would be, happy with secularism, can live with it. I mean, humanism, lives with secularism, and I think a lot of religions could learn from that.
Yeah, I think Buddhists are very accommodating. I think they promote secularism.
Yes, I have travelled to Tibet, and it was very interesting looking at the treatment of gay people in Tibet. It was a fascinating journey. And when I came back, my article appeared in a gay magazine, and soon after that, the Dalai Lama did make a statement about not, I would say, real support for gay rights, but certainly that gay people shouldn't be pilloried or bullied, or we should treat gay people fairly. So that was encouraging. I think secularism, religions will eventually come to realise that secularism actually protects them, and I think they will turn to secularism at the end of the day and realise that they're actually better off with it, because it actually does protect them, and their freedom of religion, it certainly protects them from.
There's a question from Apartment J. If you don't mind, I'm going to change the question a little bit. I think it said, have you seen tactics used in other countries for gay rights? And did you employ them yourselves? And if so, what were they?
What tactics to?
Yeah, I said, any campaigning or things like that you saw maybe going on in other countries that the gay lobby in Scotland have used.
And I can't think. There'd probably be better people that were more closely involved with Section 28. I was largely monitoring the situation, reading the press, but mostly engaged with that. But at the time during that, I was in America, and I did see similar campaigns in California where there were propositions that were being campaigned, and again I saw the religious right involved, And once again, this was pushing me further and further towards wanting to get involved with secularism or something to deal with this, because that's nearly always the source of political homophobia. It's the church, it's religion, either Islam or Christianity, but it's usually religion that's the source.
Seeing that you mentioned Islam, and of course, we've seen quite an influx of, immigrants from, Muslim countries, and it says, has that had any impact on the gay community at all?
Very interesting question. Yes, it does. It worries me a great deal that uncontrolled immigration, that if there's huge areas are transformed with a lot of immigration, it brings about, obviously, immigration can be good, good for a country. And I'm not against immigration per se, but I'm certainly against, uncontrolled immigration, because, of course, you're bringing in one particular culture. And if that culture is something like Pakistan, or Poland, or Russia, where there really isn't a history of gay tolerance, yes, it's dangerous. It is dangerous, and it's detrimental to the hard-won rights of people living here, and you can see that on our streets when you see in schools. I mean, you see young girls with headscarves. I'm not against that at all. I think people can wear what they like, but I want them to understand, and it's not happening in schools. I want them to understand what has come about in this country that has allowed them to wear what they like. I want them to understand. I want them to know the names of those suffragettes who gave their lives for the freedom of women to riled against patriarchy, and who fought hard with their lives for freedom and votes for women, and to understand that before they put on those symbols of patriarchy and religion.
You guys are actually in a really good area, because you get a fairly more broad sense of what religion does to people than we do, say, over here in the States. I mean, you guys have issues with, like the female genital mutilation is happening. You guys are currently fighting that. We don't, for the most part, have to deal with that sort of stuff over here. And we've got, kind of laws in place to protect it when it does happen. So I think, between that and your somewhat forced religion and even public schools, and I think you guys have a better idea of, kind of the atrocities that religion can do compared to what we do.
Yes. Well, our new vice chair, Ramin Faghani, is an ex-Muslim, and we have tried to engage with the mosques, but no luck so far.
I was also going to say, one thing I think I've heard you mention it on the forums, and that is how pervasive is like the American influence in a lot of the, like I said, the opposition to gay marriage, because I keep hearing that American evangelicals are infiltrating quite a lot of the churches here.
Yes, well, with the Section 28 campaign, a lot of the money came from the States. Let's make no mistake. This is when you see, as I've done here, those buckets go round. I mean, they're not filled with coins; they're filled with notes. People throw money at religion without really thinking about where that money is going, and there are huge congregations in America, and those donations go towards the most hideous and abusive insults to the human rights of people in Africa, and where campaigns are being fought. Again, towards the end of the book, I write about that as well, about the money going from America into Uganda, Nigeria, and how the evangelical broadcasting networks are broadcasting over sub-Saharan Africa. And then, of course, you've got the conservative Orthodox churches in Greece, in Romania, in Russia, and gay people will always be the litmus test for how well a country is doing in the field of human rights. I think it's always worth knowing where gay people are, because they are always going to be, it's the litmus test. If you know where gay people are, how well they're being treated, you've got a pretty good idea of where human rights stand in any one country.
Right. Well, and I think, especially when it comes to, American churches dumping money into atrocities, kind of funding other religions' atrocities, I think it just makes it easier for them to then convert people, more into Christianity. Look, this is what's happening over there. Maybe you should come to us and things will be better.
Yes. Well, it's the lies. This is it. If you keep, talking about promoting the lies, and a lot of what they say is based on lies. There's no one there to refute it. I mean, there was a study, the Renegara study that was read out in the Russian Duma, and this was discredited by his own peers, and yet is being used to actually shape Section 28 type laws in Russia, and laws that went on to discuss actually seizing the children of gay people, taking them off their parents, and things like that. So it has dangerous consequences.
Oh, absolutely. Let's see.
I think we've almost.
We've covered this fairly well.
I think we have. Yeah, I'm happy with that. If you guys are.
There's a possibility of a caller. I am speaking to someone to see if they do want to join the call.
Cool.
I suppose one question I would have, we've spoken, a lot about, the gay rights law. You say, what can, someone like me, like a heterosexual, what can we do to help you guys? Like, what would you like to see from us? I mean, we kind of feel like.
Sex cup.
Apart from that.
Sorry, I'm being flippant.
Yeah. But in ways of because sometimes we feel like, oh, we support you, but we don't really know, how we can actually help.
Seriously. Gay, straight people, I always said this, and my friend and colleague Peter Tatchell will say the same. Straight people have been our greatest allies, probably more than gay people. I mean, where a lot of gay people are? If they're not dancing in the disco, if they're not signing up to the Catholic Church like Cardinal Keith O'Brien, if they're not being caught with their pants down after joining some evangelical church, there are so many hypocrites, and gay people are not any less socially conservative than a lot of straight people. So I think looking for allies amongst gay and lesbian people, transgender people, is not always the best place to look, because society is becoming much more diverse now, and people are generally much more accepting now. We are becoming a lot more liberal than we ever were, and the average straight person is our ally, definitely. I've had more support from straight people than I have a lot of gay people. You know,
I
speak
suppose
to
it's
gay people.
probably safer for straight people to fight for gay rights in some places than it is for gay people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly one of the reasons. Gay people are not necessarily very brave. They're very frightened. They perhaps don't want their parents to know. They don't want their colleagues to know. So they live in fear. So it's difficult for them. And I get very frustrated saying, for goodness sake, you know, grow a spine, fight back. And it's very hard for a lot of people. But then when I come across this element of social conservatism, that really frustrates me, because I can't deal with that. And I don't like to see that level of hypocrisy that we saw last year with Cardinal Keith O'Brien. You know, he's so vocal against gay sex, and there he is having it. You know, I mean, for goodness sake, have the decency to shut up about it if you're having gay sex.
I think that's fairly common, isn't it? For the most part, those who protest it the most are the ones that are doing it behind closed doors. I know we find that over here quite a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, sex is becoming more diverse. The internet is opening our eyes. We have access now to sex in a lot more variety of sex. We're actually able to see it, and I think that's changing. We're becoming a lot more freer and a lot more able to talk about it more. So I think that's making people perhaps a little bit more honest in the future. I think people will get a bit more honest about it, a bit more creative about sex, because I see and always have seen sex as an art form, not a science, not a anything other than just something that's a creative force, something wonderful to be celebrated. And it's there for you if you want it. If you don't want it, you don't have to have it. It's simple as that.
I was gonna, you sort of semi-answered it, but it's I don't know if it's a cliche maybe or not, but you know, they say like the ones who rail against gays the most usually turn out to be gay themselves. Have you found that there's a grain of truth to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, it is true. And there has been research done on this in the US. There's been research that has proved this to be so. You know, it's a fact.
Yeah.
And that makes it, you really are entitled to be suspicious when you see the same men, and they're usually men, that are so vocal about gay sex in the letters column of newspapers, and you read them every day. Yes, you are entitled to ask questions. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to name any. I can.
No.
I think I know of one person currently who fits that model, but like I say, I don't think it's the place to say on air. Yeah, but I'm gonna say, wanted to just quickly go on your time as a journalist. Like, so, you know, I think maybe some people are just like, you know, writing for is it a newspaper or a magazine you write for?
Well, I don't now. I occasionally freelance, but I don't write anymore. I used to illustrate. I did more illustrating than I did writing.
Yeah.
And then I did write about sex and sexuality, and of course gay activism, and in Scots Gay magazine for 10 years, slightly more than 10 years, and for and now 2 books, and I enjoy writing about secularism, and there's always so much to learn. The Scottish Secular Society is relatively new. They were wiped out before the First World War in Scotland. There were many of them, and most of the major towns had a secular society. The parents of Keir Hardie would visit the Glasgow one, and they were wiped out. And so the Scottish Secular Society, coming back, nearly 3 years old, coming back It's really close. Yes, it's more than 3 years old. Coming back now is an interesting thing, really, because it's coming back at a time when it's most needed, when the privileges, religious privileges, are being handed out left, right, and centre, and there is needed a voice to blow the whistle and to contain religion and to ensure that it's that it doesn't overstep the mark, and that it's fair.
Yeah.
So, so it's a good time for the Scottish Secular Society.
Okay. Sheila, do you have any final questions there?
No, actually, I don't.
I think we will wrap
Thank
up.
you. That's very good at answering questions.
You did a fairly good job of explaining everything earlier.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. You're very sweet. Thank you.
Say, thanks for turning out. Like I say, this was kind of a last-minute rush job. Everything seemed to go against me today trying to get this show together, but we eventually got there in the end. Like I said, I was only 10 minutes in the door before the show started. I had to feed the little fellows you've seen on my shoulder tonight. They needed fed first, and then I had to come on, and then the computer crashed. But I think we got there, and I think we've had a good time with you, Garry. Thanks a lot, and thanks for enduring all the technical glitches we've had.
Cal, one of the other things I write about is offshore radio. A lot of interest in it, and this is modern day offshore free radio. Yeah. It's kind of free broadcasting. Yeah. It's vital. It's on the edge. It breaks down. It's wonderful, and you do a really good job, Cal.
All right.
Really good job. Congratulations.
And I think that's it. I don't know when the next there is. Yes, I just got this. Probably Sheila, you'd be new to, but there's not going to be a show on Saturday. I have got guests this weekend, so I'll be unable to do that without people wandering around in the background talking. So we will reschedule. Who was the guest? I've even forgotten who the guest. Sorry, everyone. I'm in a whirlwind right now.
It's Chris Johnson. He's the author of A Better Life, which interviews various atheists and secularists. So, and he just got funded to turn it into kind of a video production where he'll actually get to, like Richard Dawkins and various people in the secular movement. So that'll be very cool.
Yep.
I'm excited about that one.
And I think, Garry, we'll be seeing you again on the 5th of July for the charity show.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Scottish Secular Society are penciled in for an hour.
Very good.
So, yeah, like I say, there'll be more announcements. The lineup is 99% there because just as we were about to officially announce, someone had to pull out. So we've had to go and rejig the lineup once again. So sorry about that, but there will be a big announcement very soon. We'll have the full lineup forever, and I think it's looking really good who we've got lined up. So again, thank you everyone for turning out and tuning in. And if you're listening in podcast land, hope you enjoyed the show. And I see Sheila waving her hand. Have you got something to say there?
I just wanted to, do my usual plugs. Make sure everybody, make sure everybody tunes into A News. I'm there also every week. We just released a new episode on that today. And, follow me on Twitter. Find me on Facebook.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you whenever. Like I say, go down below and you'll find the Facebook and the webpage and all that, and we'll have updates soon. We'll be back on schedule soon. It's just been a busy few weeks for everyone, so I think we're going to have a good few shows in the lead up to the charity show on the 5th of July. So again, a big thank you to Garry for turning up, and hope it all goes well with the new book, Garry.
Thank you.
And hope it all goes well with the new book, Garry.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
And hope it all goes well with the new book, Garry.
And I'm echoing a lot here. Anyway, we'll leave it at that, and good night, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Defend itself against a rise in verbal abuse, beatings, suicide, murders. This wasn't Germany in 1935. This was Scotland in 2000. And it was simply sparked when MSP Wendy Alexandra announced the repeal of Section 28, and Christian fundamentalist Brian Souter poured approximately £2 million into a Keep the Clause campaign, which was backed by Cardinal Winning of the Catholic Church and a string of social conservatives. Now, it began in 1999 when controversial American TV evangelist Pat Robertson, owner of a mammoth media, educational and legal empire in the USA, with an estimated value of $1 billion. I mean, we're talking big. There's big money for the Bank of Scotland. Forget, having customers in Scotland filling the coffers of the Bank of Scotland. This was a biggie. This was bigger than having, the population of Scotland on board. Pat Robertson was introduced to ultra-conservative Catholic Bill Hendry of this Bank of Scotland's executive vice president in the USA. And the bank announced, soon after, it was setting up a telebanking operation with Pat Robertson, who once claimed that, and I'm quoting now from the feminist agenda is not about equal rights for women. It's about a socialist, anti-family political movement that encourages women to leave their husbands, kill children.
Yes, as long as everything holds up. So, yeah, please welcome. So, everyone, please welcome Garry Otton. It's great to have you back on. And like I say, I am really sorry about the delays in getting this show and the problems we've had.
Okay, thanks, Cal. Thanks, Sheila.
I suppose. No, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
You just right. So your new book is Religious Fascism: The Repeal of Section 28, and I think probably for some of our viewers and listeners, the best thing I think would be what exactly was or is Section 28.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, some will see the imposition of Section 28, which was the law that forbade the quote-unquote promotion of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship, against the backdrop of Margaret Thatcher addressing a sea of waving Union Jacks at the Conservative Party conference, 1987. Following hot on the heels, of course, of exaggerated tabloid stories of black lesbian self-defense groups, or books like Jenny Lives with Erica Martin, Susan Birch's book, which was found in school libraries. Actually, it was found in a teacher's resources library. Accompanying this law's passage in 1988, a firebomb went off at the offices of London's gay newspaper, Capital Gay. If I remember correctly, far from condemning the action, Tory MP Dame Elaine Kellett-Bowman stood up in the House of Commons to voice her contempt for gay sex and to call their children practice witchcraft, destroy capitalism, and become lesbians. So you only have to Google Pat Robertson to get plenty of classic idiotic statements like that and better. But the bank announced it was setting up the telebanking operation with him. And as Bank of Scotland share prices fell and clients started withdrawing their savings, the bank was forced to pull out. That was when Robertson labelled Scotland a dark place overrun by homosexuals. The Bank of Scotland called on media boss and ex-Sun editor Jack Irvine. He was also a drummer in the band B.A. Robertson, if you remember that, yeah. To step in and help. And it was during the equally contentious debate about an equal age of consent, Irvine was famous for referring to pretty young boys of 16 who couldn't vote being mature enough to be bum chums for sleazy old pervs. So you get an idea where Jack Irvine was coming from. Scotland's richest man, stagecoach boss Brian Souter, a Bank of Scotland customer, a member of the Hellfire and Brimstone Church of Nazarene, was sufficiently inspired by Irvine to court him for an idea of his own. They shared a good lawyer. Jack Irvine's business partner, Peter Watson, sometimes accompanied him on business trips to the Cayman Islands. He was the man behind legal firm Levi and McRae, which legaled articles for the press, so pretty influential. And as Scotland's top lawyer, declared that it was right that there should be an intolerance of evil. What followed soon after that was a dramatic increase of attacks on gay men and another bombing of a gay bar in Rochester with tear gas. Now, when this Tory, anti-gay, religiously inspired law was challenged in 2000, Scotland was the main battleground. In England and Wales, efforts to keep Section 28 on the statute books was, to a large extent, pretty pointless, since Section 28 applied not to schools, but local authorities, whose control many had opted out of under measures introduced by, of all people, former Tory leader Margaret Thatcher. So, a bit of a waste of time there. But the Scots will remember the repeal as a time when the gay community were under attack from billboards mounted across every available space in Scotland, vilifying homosexual practices. Intellectuals who wrote newspapers to lend support were denounced. Newspapers spread warnings of cliques, rumours of an international conspiracy, and attempts were made to close LGBT organisations, and doors and windows of such premises were smashed. Pictures could even be found in newspapers at the time illustrating homosexuals' distinguishing features, you know, their fingers. Parliament wavered and buckled while the community in crisis was left to defend.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. This is Trolling with Logic, and it's a very kind of rushed, slapped together episode. We've had so many problems getting tonight's guest on. The original time it was the technical problems, and just before we went on air, the technical problems have reappeared. So hopefully we can hold out long enough to give you a good show. Just to let everyone know, you can ask your questions anytime in the chat room, and you can call in. As you can see, the Skype contact is Trolling with Logic, and like I say, if you call in, please remember you grant us permission to use your likeness, because the show is later uploaded on iTunes and YouTube. Like I say, it's a reduced crew today. Welcoming back Sheila. How are you doing?
Hey, Cal. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
All right, and so we'll very quickly introduce the guest. If you've been watching the show for a while, he'll be quite familiar to you. He is, I think he's the, I don't know if he's the former or he's still the secretary of the Scottish Secular Society. He was also all right, and a journalist for Gay Star News, if I remember correctly.
Scots Gay.
Scots Gay, yeah. I get those
10
two
years,
mixed up.
10 years stint. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, and also he wrote the book Sexual Fascism. I can't remember the publication date. And
examining the treatment of the sex in the Scottish media.
Okay, and his most recent book, which is just released, is it tomorrow? It's really officially released, Garry.
That's the launch, yeah. I did it privately on Facebook and stuff with my friends on Scottish Secular Society, and it's Religious Fascism. And it's the repeal of Section 28, which I hope you'll give me a moment to talk about on air, providing we don't crash.